the icon of Christopher the Cynocephalus, hagiographic myth or reality, in the Eastern Orthodox tradition of Christianity, which is the primary creator and consumer of Christian religious icons. There is a very strong emphasis on tradition, but tradition certainly does not guarantee freedom from error. These errors sometimes affect saints in the Orthodox calendar whose lives have been so distorted and embellished by fantasy that they are no longer recognizable. One such image, burdened with accumulated errors, can be seen in the painting and veneration of icons of a saint called Christopher the dog-headed, or Christopher Cynocephalus, also known by the Greek name Christopher Kynokephalos. The artists who painted these icons, some of which were even included in painters' manuals, truly believed that there existed a saint with the head of a dog. Icons of Saint Christopher the dog-headed were painted and venerated in both Russian and Greek Orthodoxy, and there is documentary evidence of them in iconographic manuals. Today, however, no new icons of this saint are seen, and there is no evidence of veneration of his older representations. In early pre-Christian Greek sources, there are stories of men with dog heads, so it is not surprising that when people read about the existence of a saint from the land of the dog-headed people, whose name was Christophoros, the bearer of crest, they assumed that he belonged to a strange race at the edge of the world, and that he was a soldier converted to Christianity. The dog-headed men in these ancient stories, at least when referring to Africa, may in fact have been baboons, which the Greeks later called dog-heads, kynokephaloi. In Herodotus' Histories 4.191-3 c. 5th century BC, we find the following for the eastern part of Libya, which is inhabited by nomads, is low, lying, and sandy as far as the river Triton, but the land to the west of this, where the farmers live, is very mountainous and wooded and full of wild animals. In this land there are huge snakes and lions, and elephants and bears, and asp vipers, horned donkeys, and the dog-headed men and the headless men, who have eyes in their chests, as the Libyans say, and the wild men and women. Other early accounts also speak of dog-headed men in India. Christians accepted the existence of dog-headed men as part of the presumed knowledge of the time. In Cyprus, at a much later date, another tradition developed according to which Christopher was not born with a dog's head, but was an exceptionally handsome young man. Women constantly pursued him, and he, wishing to avoid temptation, prayed to God to deliver him. In response to his prayer, God changed his head into that of a dog. Other early narratives also place dog-headed men in India. According to some researchers, there is no connection between Christopher and Roman depictions of the Egyptian jackal-headed god Anubis. This may be so, but the resemblance to icons of Christopher is nevertheless striking, and there are many gaps in his history. A ceramic icon of Saint Christopher the Cynocephalus and Saint George. The image dates from the 6th to 7th century AD, Fig. 3. The earliest surviving example of an Eastern Christian icon of Christopher with a dog's head appears to be a ceramic image from Macedonia, with a Latin inscription depicting him together with Saint George. During the modernizing reign of Peter the Great, the Holy Synod banned the painting of icons of Christopher the Cynocephalus in Russia in 1722. But, as with other icons, such as depictions of the Lord Sabaoth, banned by the Council of the 100 Chapters, this prohibition was not strictly observed, especially by the Old Believers, who did not accept the decrees of the State Church, and by those icon painters who produced icons for them. People felt no particular need to stop doing what had long been done, because in Orthodoxy tradition is of great importance. In Russian icons, Christopher's head sometimes resembles that of a horse more than in Greek Iconography Fig. 4. There is even a Russian icon of Christopher the dog, headed with hagiographic scenes. Did there ever exist a real Christopher, under any name, with or without a dog's head? This hardly matters, because the story has been so distorted by time and imagination that any real person who may have stood behind it has sunk into hagiography to the point of oblivion. And it often happens that there is little or no difference between Eastern Orthodox traditions and folk tales. Russian icon of Saint Christopher from the 18th century. State Museum of the History of Religion, St. Petersburg. An old Russian painter's manual describes how this saint should be depicted, and the holy martyr Christopher, with a dog's head in armor, holding a cross in one hand and a sword in a scabbard in the other outer garment. Cinnabar with white undergarment, green. Elsewhere it is written Christopher, a young man like Demetrius of Thessaloniki, garment, carmine undergarment, green, in his hand a scroll, Almighty Lord, where my memory is honored and you are praised, save them from sin and do not judge them. In the following example we see the so-called prayer icon, Christopher the dog, headed in Roman armor, with the holy martyr Sophia and her 3 daughters Faith, Hope, and Love. Each holds the cross of martyrdom. At the outer edges are the saints Catherine and Martha. Christ blesses from above the clouds. Surprisingly often, icons depicting the dog headed Saint Christopher together with Saint Sophia and her daughters are encountered. It is claimed that the reason for this is that, for the Old Believers, these saints symbolized steadfastness in persecution and martyrdom, and it was also believed that Christopher protected against sudden death. Thus, an icon combining these saints was commonly found as a family icon among Old Believers. The ban on the dog, headed Christopher by the Holy Synod in 1722, only reinforced the Old Believers' conviction that the persecuting state church was on the side of the Antichrist, and therefore they clung even more firmly to icons of Christopher the dog, headed, and continued to paint and venerate them, even after they disappeared from the iconography of the state church. Here is another example of the same pairing of Christopher with Saint Sophia and her daughters. Icon of Saint Christopher with Saint Sophia and her 3 daughters, with the saints Catherine and Martha at the edges. Russian icon of Saint Christopher with Saint Sophia and her daughters Faith, Hope, and Love. A Russian blog offers an interesting contemporary reader's story about Christopher the Cynocephalus. A customer enters the large Sofrino store, which is run by the Russian Orthodox Church under the Moscow Patriarchate. Sofrino sells all kinds of items for the Russian Orthodox Church, including icons. The man asks for an icon of Saint Christopher painted in the old style, with a dog's head. The clerk replies that the image is non-canonical and was banned by the Holy Synod in the 18th century. The customer counters by saying that the Council of 1971 of the Moscow Patriarchate removed all restrictions on old believer canons and icons and lifted the anathema against old belief. He adds that old-style depictions of Christopher are still found in many local Orthodox churches. The clerk has nothing of the sort. He replies that it is not their concern, that the factory is forbidden to produce them, and that what the customer is asking for is blasphemy, adding that the shop sells only the true image of Christopher. Interestingly, he showed the customer an example of the true image on his computer Sate, Christopher carrying Jesus on his shoulders, an iconographic type that is just as mythical as the dog-headed version. Here is a modern interpretation of this type. The story behind it is found in the Golden Legend by Jacobus de Voragine. According to this relatively late but colorful legend, Christopher was about 18 feet tall and took it as his Christian task to carry people across a dangerous river. Fig. 8. As the tale goes, one day he was in his hut when he heard a child calling him. Here again appears the old third time motif in this part of the story, as given in the Golden Legend. The third time he was called, and he came there and found a child by the river, who asked him to carry him safely across the water. Then Christopher lifted the child onto his shoulders, took his staff, and entered the river to cross it. And the water of the river rose, and swelled more and more, and the child was heavy as lead. And the farther he went, the more the water increased and rose, and the more and more the child weighed, so that Christopher was in great distress, and feared that he would drown. And when he came out with great pain and crossed the water, he set the child down on the ground, and said to him, "Child, you have put me in great danger. You weigh almost as much as the whole world upon me, and I cannot bear a heavier burden." And the child answered, "Christopher, do not be amazed, for you not only carried the whole world upon yourself, but you carried upon your shoulders him who created and made the whole world. I am Jesus Christ, the King whom you serve, and that you may know that what I say is true. Plant your staff in the ground by your house, and tomorrow you will see that it will bear flowers and fruit." And he immediately vanished from his sight. Then Christopher planted his staff in the ground, and when he arose in the morning, he found his staff like a palm tree, bearing flowers, leaves, and dates. The Golden Legend or Lives of the Saints, compiled by Jacobus de Voragine, Archbishop of Genoa, 1275. First edition, 1470. Translated into English by William Caxton, first edition, 1483. Edited by F. S. Ellis, Temple Classics, 1900s, reprinted 1922-1931. This motif of Christopher carrying the Christ child who becomes heavier and heavier is a folkloric motif classified in the Arnold-Thompson system. There is an interesting halfway depiction of this type, in which Christopher still has a dog's head. In the Church of the Nativity in Est Rata, Romanius Naiteria Domnului est Rata. Interestingly, this motif of a man carrying someone who becomes heavier and heavier across a river is found in a much earlier ancient Greek episode involving Jason and the goddess Hera. In it, Jason is traveling home. On the way, he reaches the river Anorus, where he finds an old woman who wishes to cross, but no one is willing to carry her. Jason takes her onto his back and steps into the water. But as he crosses, the old woman's, who is Hera in disguise, becomes very heavy, and Jason loses his sandal in the river. A key plot point that leads to his quest for the Golden Fleece. According to legend, Jason carries Hera across the river, disguised as an old woman. Christopher is regarded as the patron saint of travelers. Those of you old enough to remember the 1960s may recall the fashion among the surfer crowd and others of wearing small, round, colorful silver and enamel cestine Christopher medals. These are now collectible items. Saint Christopher was removed from the Roman Catholic calendar of saints in 1969, but he is still found as Great Martyr Christopher in the calendar of the Eastern Orthodox Church on May 9.
Agni parthene despina achrande theotoke parthene mi tyrannasa πανέδροσετε πόγε υψηλότερα ουρανών Αθήνων λαμπροτέρα παρθενικών χωρών αγγέλων υπερτέρα εκλαμπροτέρα ουρανών φωτός καθαροτέρα των ουρανίων στρατιών πάσων αγιωτέρα Μαρία η Παρθενέ κόσμου παντός Κυρία άχραντε νύμφη Παναγνέ δεσπίνα Παναγία Μαρία νύμφη Άννασα χαράς ημών αιτία εμνή βασίλισσα μητήρη περαγία Χερουβίμ, χερε ύμνος αγγέλε. Χερε οδή των σεραφείμ, χαρά των αρχαγγέλων. Συγχάριν εξαιτούμε. Χωρίς εμνή και άσπηλε δεσπίνα Παναγία. Σε να υγιασμένε αντιλαβού μουρίσε με από του πολεμίου και
Καταυγασμένος ο Άγιος Νεκτάριος από το μεγαλείο της Θεοτόκου, συνέθεσε τον γνωστότατο ύμνο «Αγνή Παρθένε», που εφραίνει την ψυχή κάθε πιστού. Την ονομάζει Δέσποινα, Άχραντη, Μητέρα, Βασίλισσα, Πανένδρωση, Πόκον, δηλαδή αγνό, ακατέργαστο μαλλί προβάτου, για να παραπέμψει στην αγνότητα και την αϊπαρθενία της, υψηλότερη από τους ουρανούς και λαμπρότερη από τις ακτίνες του ήλιου, και με τόσα άλλα ονόματα προσπαθεί να αποδώσει την δόξα και την τιμή της.